The African Transformation Movement is challenging Parliament's decision not to adopt the Phala Phala report. The party approached the Western Cape High Court with an urgent application seeking to have Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula's decision reviewed and declared invalid. The ATM's request, was rejected twice by Mapisa-Nqakula. For more information, we're joined by the leader of the African Transformation Movement, Mr. Vuyo Zungula. Thank you very much for availing yourself this morning. Yesterday we heard from Parliament essentially saying that the National Assembly has dealt with the Section 89 process and has closed the matter following its decision not to accept its recommendations, pretty much saying this matter has been buried. You're hoping a court will come to a different conclusion?
Yes, indeed. If you were to look at what Parliament did, Parliament took an irrational decision because you've got an independent panel that is set up by Parliament to investigate if there is any form of wrongdoing. That independent panel comes with a conclusion that there may be wrongdoing. Now, any rational institution will say, okay, here is a report from credible individuals that is saying there may be wrongdoing. Any rational institution would say, let us further probe the matter. What we're going to vote for last week, in fact, what we're voting for last week was not to impeach the president. It was to start an inquiry whereby the president can actually state his case, prove his innocence, and Parliament can have the benefit of calling witnesses, examine all forms of evidence in order to reach a conclusion or a determination whether the president is guilty or is not guilty. Therefore, Parliament, in our view as the ATM, has failed in its constitutional mandate of oversight and accountability when it voted against holding an inquiry that would determine whether the president has committed wrongdoing or not.
In your submission or to your submission to the courts, help us understand what it is then you are asking them to do.
Firstly, there's two things that we're asking the courts to do. Firstly, the decision by the Speaker not to grant us a secret ballot. She used a wrong test by asking members of Parliament to state or to prove that there are extenuating circumstances that would warrant the use of a closed ballot, which is a secret vote. And she further on went to say the onus is on the parties instead of actually, dealing with the matter of the secret ballot, not wanting the parties to have the onus to state why. The second issue is that from her testing or from her methodology, she says the default position in the voting method is always an open ballot system, whereas the SCA and the Constitutional Court previous rulings had already ruled that the methodology that ought to be used by the Speaker to reach that determination whether the secret ballot or an open ballot is a preferred method to be used should not be a matter of firstly asking members of Parliament to show whether the circumstances or have the idea that that is a default position. The test or the methodology to be used is in light of whatever Parliament is going to vote on. What is the best method of voting that will engender oversight and accountability on the executive, not wanting members of Parliament to show extenuating circumstances? So if she got the methodology wrong, that means the decision was wrong. Therefore, the decision to say, let us vote via an open ballot system, that decision, in our view, is irrational. That is the first part. The second part is the one that I've explained of the National Assembly has a responsibility by Parliament to make sure that it plays an oversight role over the executive. You'll recall that a few years ago, the National Assembly took a decision of not adopting a report on the Nkandla matter, and eventually what went on, parties went to court, and the courts found that Parliament has actually betrayed its constitutional mandate of accountability by not holding the president accountable. Because if we're to ask any person now, there's no single South African that can say the president is guilty, the president is innocent, because with the information that has been out in the public domain between 1 June and until now, we can't reach that conclusion. The only way to reach a conclusion is to have an inquiry. That is what we're hoping for and we're moving for as the ATM. Let Parliament have an inquiry that will reach a determination whether the president is innocent. If he's innocent, we move on. If he's guilty of any of these transgressions, then he must be held accountable. That's all we are asking for.
Sure. So there are two possible outcomes. The courts could grant your request and they could say no. In the event that they do grant your request, what then happens in terms of the rules of Parliament? And in the event that you sit again, do you perceive that the very same people who voted a few days ago against the adoption of this report will do it again? Is it not a futile exercise?
It's definitely not a futile exercise, because if you check, many of the members of particularly the ruling party were voting under duress because they were threatened to vote a particular way. You know, if you were there, you could see the body language of many members of the ANC. They did not want to vote against that report because it is clear, broad as daylight, that the president has a case to answer. Now, but because they were threatened and shamed, they are thinking about their livelihoods, they are thinking about many things, they are thinking about their careers, they have to toe the party line. And we'll recall that the Constitutional Court had a ruling on the matter that whenever there's a conflicting interest between party interest and the national interest, MPs must always vote in the interest of the country. Now, MPs can't vote in the interest of the country if they are threatened in a particular way, that if they vote against a party line, they are going to be expelled, they are going to be disciplined. Therefore, that is why a secret ballot is the preferred method when it comes to accountability, because members are going to vote with their conscience and members are going to vote in line with that previous court ruling that members must vote and take into account the interests of the nation.
So this is one of the matters that the new NEC of the ANC will be tasked with dealing with, especially when it comes to some of the members. Is it 4 or 5 members that actually voted for this report to be adopted? ANC members, that is. And maybe just in reading the mood of the moment, we just heard the announcement of the 80-member NEC composition. And so do you perceive that, this is something that the ANC will move away from, given what we have seen, them rallying around their president, even now giving him a second term?
Look, the ANC will never hold their president accountable. Even if Mr. Ramaphosa were to kill a person, they will always defend him. You'll recall that when Mr. Mbeki was the president and there was the HIV issue, they defended him. Only when he left office that they started speaking out. Similarly with Mr. Zuma, they defended him. When he went out, then they spoke about the 9 wasted years, etc. So it's always in the culture of the ANC to defend their president, even if there's clear wrongdoing. So that is why opposition parties are critical when it comes to holding the executive accountable, because our stay in parliament and our functioning is not entwined in the operations and the posture of the ANC. We exist outside of the ANC. And secondly, our stay in parliament is dependent on the people. And I want to remind that the people elected us as opposition parties to actually guard the executive. Therefore, if we are not doing that role of holding the executive accountable, we as parliament, we as opposition parties are failing. That is why we need to play our part so that we've got a functioning parliament, a parliament that can actually hold the executive accountable. Because for South Africa to thrive, you need functioning institutions. And key to that is to have a functioning parliament, because parliament is a key institution whereby when it functions and functions well, we are most likely to see other institutions functioning, because parliament has got that special responsibility of playing oversight over all of the executive or government departments. Therefore, if parliament is failing in its constitutional mandate, then it means the entire country can become a failed state. So hence you find that we as the ATM were relentless and were resilient on the matter, because it is not just about this Phala Phala matter, but it's about the principle of parliament playing its role of oversight.
I think it was you on the 13th of December saying these words to members of the ANC, "Banashem dianisizela," because you're defending something that you don't even know. And so when will you know from the courts what will happen next?
We are hoping that the matter will be heard on the 25th of January. Then from there we'll be able to know what's going to happen. But with our legal team, we are very confident that there is no court that can rule that Parliament was right when it did not play its oversight role. There is no court that can say the open ballot system was the preferred or the correct way for members to vote, whereas there were threats, and that system could not engender effective oversight particularly because, firstly, it's a sensitive member. Secondly, parties where there's one party that instructed members to vote in a particular direction. Hence, you find that, in our view, we are very confident that we are going to push this matter and the courts will rule in our favor.
I mean, there's claims going about, so I do wonder if you have heard anything about the former Chief Justice, Darsandile Ngcobo, facing threats to his life?
Yeah, I've read about it also, but I do not know. Besides what I've read in the news, there's nothing more that I know of the issue. But the issue of Phala Phala, for us, if you can look at how, people who are trying to hold the president accountable, they are always criticized. They are always, made to fear. They are always made to be as if they are doing something wrong. Whereas if the president is indeed innocent, no one is saying the president must be impeached now. No one is saying the president must be removed now. What we're saying is that let the president account. If the president does not account, that sends a very wrong message to future presidents, to the ministers, to the entire public sector, that if you occupy public office and you have political power, you can do anything and everything and you will not account because your own organization will defend you. Hence, you find that it's very critical for the functioning of our country that we, as opposition parties, we remain relentless in pursuing accountability on the matter.
Yeah, and essentially, I mean, your party will be one of those that goes down in history for actually firing the salvo that got us to where we are now. And I guess maybe just a closing thought, why you've explained why it's important that you do this and citing the everyday person on the ground. It's Christmas. On a lighter note, your message to people maybe, and as when happy holidays, safe travels, London.
No, I think Abantu, it's sad to say like we do not have anything to celebrate as a country because there's increase in killings, unemployment, gender-based violence. However, I think we as South Africans, we just need to remain positive. And more than being positive, we need to take actions to better the lives of not only ourselves, but abantwana bethu. Because whether we like it or not, our children will inherit a country that, if siyayijonga ngoku, there is no prospects of a brighter future for abantwana bethu. Therefore, it must worry us as citizens that the country is heading towards this direction. And we can't just sit, complain on social media or speak in our dining rooms about the state of the country. We need to play a positive contribution, make a positive contribution, so abantwana bethu can inherit a better country. So abantu must enjoy their holidays, bonwabe baziphathe kakuhle and uThixo abe nabo.
Nkosi Vuyo Zungula is the leader of the African Transformation Movement.